Progress.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome. We're so glad you're here tonight. I'm Myra Bellinger from Faith, Learn, Thrive, and we are glad that you have joined us tonight. It was a great, people are coming in. Yep. Yay. Thank you for being here tonight. Dr. Rona Williams and myself certainly welcome you. Go ahead and get everybody on the line tonight that you know. Tonight, we're going to be talking about strategies for reaching Gen Z. And some of you may have been privy and thrilled to have been a part of the last podcast that we actually did. It was amazing. And this young lady, this wonderful, skilled individual that's coming to be with us tonight, she and the team that we talked about the last time, they absolutely rocked it. And I cannot wait to where Brandi Williams is going to take us tonight and the things that Brandi will share with us. Brandi, of course, is the director of the African American Church Evangelism Institute at Wheaton College, Billy Graham Center. And Brandi, are you there tonight? Are you going to be able to come on? And are you there, ready to speak to the Brandi is just going to open and share and pour. And we are so ready to receive everything that you have to share with us tonight. And so thanks for being with us, and you can take it away.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. So we have an hour, right? How much time do you need? Would you like for Q&A,
Yes.
Myra?
It's totally up to you. Maybe 15 minutes is fine. Afterwards, 10 minutes, whatever's up
All
to
right.
you.
I'm not able to share my screen.
Yes.
Nevertheless, everyone.
Yes, you can. Just
Yeah.
a moment.
Okay.
I will give you that privilege. Absolutely.
All right. Well, I want to say hello to everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Brandi Nicole Williams, and you have joined this webinar entitled 8 Strategies for Reaching and Developing Gen Z. I'm going to share my screen so we're all on one accord. All right. So, all right, there we go. So welcome to 8 Strategies for Reaching and Developing Gen Z. My name is Brandi Nicole Williams, and I am the director for the African American Church Evangelism Institute at the Wheaton College Billy Graham Center. So the Wheaton College Billy Graham Center is an evangelism hub. We do training and development for pastors and various church leaders, specifically focusing on evangelism. We have 9 institutes that serve various niches within the body, if you will. I use the term niche, but so I'm focusing specifically on the needs and challenges of African American pastors and churches, but we also have institutes that cater to folks who work in correction ministries or rural ministries, church multiplication and church planting. And so anyway, love for you to check us out. Our web URL is on the screen for my institute specifically, and that's africanamericanchurch.org. So in addition to that, I'm currently completing my PhD in organizational studies at Eastern University, and my research focuses on the role of the Black church in entrepreneurship development. And so I definitely have a researcher inside of me. I actually started off as a researcher with this institute, doing research on Gen Z with Black pastors and hearing their views for the state of the church at this current time, and then also conducting research with young adults, African American young adults, churched and unchurched, about their views on faith, spirituality, and the church. And so that's how I started off with the Institute in 2021. I've been director for the past year and a half, and it's been a blessing. So before I get started with the presentation formally, I would love to hear from you, whether you come off mute or you can put it in the chat. I would love to just hear what brought you here today, what's your role or function with Gen Z, and what do you hope to gain from tonight's webinar? Good evening, Jerry. Thank you for being here. So Jerry, Ashley, Travis, Pamela, Jamaica, what has you here tonight? Building the young adult ministry back up. Thank you, Liddell. Liddell, what's your role at your church? Okay. um, Jamaica, Travis, Ashley. I don't want to do all the talking tonight. So, Travis, youth pastor. Okay, great. Thank you. Youth pastor, maintain the momentum of the youth ministry, invitation from the Ormond Center, and okay, youth ministry as well. All right, so I'll assume that that's pretty much the audience for tonight, and stay by your keyboard because I'll have you chime in another moment. So thank you for that. So before we get to talking about strategies for reaching and developing Gen Z, I first feel like it's necessary to talk about to understand who we're talking about. No sense in trying to reach and develop folks who we don't understand where they fall. So within the church today, there are 5 generations. Okay, well, 6 if you include Gen Alpha. But in terms of young adult and 4 in terms of leadership within the church, you have 5 generations. And so Gen Z is positioned for folks that are 12, I think they're 13 to 26 now. I myself am a millennial, and then we have Gen X baby boomers and the traditionalists, or some call the silent generation. So if you would just drop in the chat, where do you fall on this spectrum? I think it's important to understand that societal events, things happening in culture impact the way people engage with their faith, or it influences just how they live out loud, just views and opinions. And so looks like we have baby boom, we got a couple baby boomers, we got Gen X, we got, okay, look like baby boomers are leading the way. Travis and I are the only millennials. And okay, and then we have a couple Gen X. Okay, great. So it's important to understand who you're ministering to. And so with that said, I just want to share a few takes on Gen Z. And so that I can set it up for who it is that you're actually looking to reach and develop. So these are some stats I borrowed from Dr. Wanda Bordas, for example. And so in her research, she talks a lot about the uncertainties that young adults are facing. So whether that's eco-anxiety, the climate change that we're experiencing, okay, some people are still not experiencing summer and we're almost in mid-June or Yeah, we are in mid-June. We're in mid-June, and some people are still not experiencing summer temps, whether it's being debt burdened by student loans and just that advancement of college being significant. Millennials, especially, being burdened by debt, when it comes to accumulating wealth and advancing in many instances, whereas baby boomers controlled 21% of the wealth when they were the same age as millennials or Gen Z, that's happening later in life. So in addition to maybe student loan debt, you have rent burden. And then you also have gun violence and just the rise that we've seen, whether in just general society or in school shootings, for example. Now, aside from that, Gen Z is living in a um, much more multicultural society, even though we see that it's still half white, but there are much more multiracial children than we've seen before. So even that impacts how they view one another. Then you have stats around sex and gender. And so if you look at this, you see how from generation to generation, there has been a steady increase in how people identify in terms of their sexuality, whether it's pronouns, which you see here that in 2019, they was actually made a singular word in the Webster Dictionary. And then even things like gender identity as it pertains to what you can select on your State Department documents if you are gender non-conforming, and so not having to choose male or female, but something that's more fluid. So this is the world that they live in. As it pertains to how they view the workplace, I would say that millennials, we really took a lot into our own hands in terms of creating our own platforms, and Gen Z continues to do that. But the average, Gen Z and especially boomers, they're going to stay faithful to the workplace. They're going to, likely have been in the same, company or position for years. And so that may not be the case for Gen Z. They find purpose and value when they make a positive difference. So they're not going to be the worker bee. They want to make a contribution to things. They value innovation and what I like to call entrepreneurship. So even though we've read up on some things that show that Gen Z is highly interested in entrepreneurship, entrepreneurship is the opportunity to personally create something that's impactful within their organization and having the autonomy to do so. And then when it comes to faith and spirituality, we see here that in 2020, 45% of Gen Z were what we call nones. Nones include nothing in particular, atheists and agnostics, as you see there. And then, pardon me? And then the remaining being 35% Christian and 20% other religions. So, again, if we're going to reach and develop Gen Z, we have to understand the times in which they live, the culture, the context. So, just from a very high level, in terms of the research that we did with Gen Z, these are the findings from our qualitative study, that from those who were churched, meaning they had been active within the church for 6 months or more, this is what they desired within their particular church settings. Overarching theme, they want a conversational culture that gets real and raw. And real and raw means facing taboo conversations about sexuality, sex, fornication. They want depth and honesty. They can click on TikTok, they can click on a reel on Instagram, and they can get, an influencer, a therapist, a motivational speaker, giving them much more in-depth and honest views about life than often they can from the pulpit or even among leaders within the church. They desire to know how you wrestled to get to where you are. Meaning, how did you transition from your pit to your mountain, if you will. And so, it's really all about being authentic. Even sometimes being, I don't even think sometimes, I think just in general, just being willing to say when you don't know, because that's messy, but that's real. That's the reality of walking this journey with Christ. And then finally, we found that they're just looking for home. They don't feel at home in many places. And I think that that's tied to a lot of the fact that they spend a lot of time in digital spaces. And then for a high level, when it comes to unchurched focus groups, so in our unchurched focus group, we had, for example, a Christian that had converted to Islam, a couple agnostic folks, atheists, and then folks that just kind of had a hodgepodge of things going on. But what we found in our focus groups is that no one had actually experienced personal trauma within the church. Everything that they shared, most of what they shared, was from stories that have been handed down to them or things that they had seen, in the media. And so their perceptions, not their experiences, their perceptions have led them to believe, and we know that some of this is true, however, has led them to believe that to be a Christian is to be rigid and to have a lot of rules, that it's fear-based, that is not inclusive, that is very judgmental and rejecting, that is fanatical and dominating. But yet, if they were to actually see people living out their faith and what they would consider to be genuine faith, it would just simply mean to love your neighbor. Well, that's what we're called to do. So it's interesting. It was just interesting hearing from them that they're saying that that's not actually what they feel like they perceive Christians to do, love their neighbors. So with that being said, let's just get into it. How do we reach and develop Gen Z? Before I go there, what I would love for you to do in the chat is just get present to who the Gen Z folks are in your life. What do I mean by that? Drop a few names in the chat, whether it's names of folks in your youth group, in your youth ministry, a cousin, a neighbor, So I have a sister. She's 20 years old. Her name is Taylor. She's on a full ride to the University of Chicago. I thought I was a cool big sister. We're 22 years apart. I thought I was a cool big sister, and she kindly informs me that I am a second mom. I am not a cool big sister. And so that even shows you, just with me being one generation ahead of her, even though I'm kind of, on the border, like with that Gen X group or whatever, that there's a lot that I don't understand. And so, Taylor sat in church with my mom for years and doesn't feel like she got anything, and so, things like that break my heart. I have a cousin named Ari, who is 25, and Ari has, wasn't really brought up in a Christian home. She might have gleaned some things from my grandmother, but is bending towards new age spirituality. Okay. So at the end of the day, and Ari actually sat in on one of these sessions. And so, how I reach in and develop her is like, I bring her to the table before, a lot of times I think we feel like people have to be qualified to sit in and listen on certain things. And that's not my approach, in that instance with those relationships. So thank you. Thank you for sharing those folks in your life. So, okay. So then now the conversation becomes, not just how do we reach and develop Gen Z, how do we reach and develop Gabby and Zamir and Amaya and Juwan and Josh and Monty and Diamond? How do we reach and develop, David and Maya? Okay. So that's what this conversation is about. So, number one, we reach and develop Gen Z by implementing shared leadership models. And what does that look like? It looks like active participation. Okay. Gen Z wants to be involved. They want to be hands-on. They want to feel like they're making a contribution, as I mentioned, to trends in the workplace. And so, when you implement a shared leadership model, it doesn't mean you're just handing something over to them before they're ready. You know, a lot of times people, when they talk about leadership transitions or succession, they use the model of I do, we do, you do, so that you can mentor someone and teach and train someone to be able to handle a particular task or assignment. The benefit of that is that you foster direction and mission of your church community so that the history, the systems that you have, that they're not lost, that the next generation is picking it up. And then you are also expanding your resources and you are growing a pool of diverse experiences because they do have a different view from you. And so I really encourage, number one, implementing shared leadership models to reach and develop Gen Z so that you can bridge the generation gap and develop a sense of ownership within them. No one wants to just sit on the sideline and watch you do all things. So I would highly encourage, you know, finding ways that they can actively participate, finding ways that they feel involved in the decision making, you know, for the things that impact them and to impact those that are like them. I always say that they are much more likely to follow someone that looks like them. So then how do you groom or how do you mentor a few so that they can then be a part of training the many? All right. And so our second way to reach and develop Gen Z is to reimagine church. So what does that mean? It means that we break past tradition, right? Any other organization in the world, there, you know, you think about your favorite coffee shop, or you think about a coaching business, or you know, Target. I love Target. Okay. So any business is going to assess what's working or what's not working. Churches should be doing the same thing. I always say that church models were handed down to us, but that doesn't mean that the model that has been handed is the model that is needed. And so we need to create models that align with the times. Whereas folks just used to come to church, or they had this need for God because God and spirituality and the Christian faith was more prevalent in the home. Maybe people just kind of more innately had that. The church was a very central, has been a very central figure to the Black community. However, that generational allegiance that was once there is no longer there. What does that mean? You can't be inward focused, and the church has gotten so used to folks coming inside the church, coming to them, that, you know, we've gotten away. We are experiencing mission drift. I'll put it that way. And so we have to go beyond the four walls. That means outreach. That means virtual options. That means creating a model that's altogether different, like a supper or a brunch or something like that, that has a fellowship theme. Maybe you have a worship night. Maybe church is actually a series that is panel style, where they actually hear from leaders. Or maybe church is everybody coming together and bringing their budget to work on because we want to be good stewards. Church could be whatever that necessary thing that it is to be, so that we're not forsaking the body, but that we're growing and we're actually applying the word to our lives. And so I mentioned this panels interview style. And so that's what I mean when I say meeting current needs. I think more than ever, there's so many resources out there that are competing against what used to solely be found in the church. And so then we need to be looking at how we can equip people just to live their lives well and to inform them with a Christian foundation. The third way that we reach and develop Gen Z is by increasing the use of technology. So digital spaces are spaces for spiritual activity, period. It just is a thing. It's not going away. We are not back to normal just because of, we seem to be in the clear, with COVID. It's a forever thing. It's not going anywhere. And so the fact that we're not in shutdown and in the height of a pandemic is no excuse to let up on cultivating digital spaces. Now, digital spaces and engaging via social media is not a thing where, you're just posting to inform. That's one thing. It's one thing to post and to inform. But what would it look like for you to actually engage with the young folks online? So you're liking them, you're commenting them. Maybe, there's a young adult in your congregation in the church that has a very great platform. Maybe they themselves are sharing the gospel, or maybe they just have a viewpoint that should be shared. Maybe they're doing well in their career, so on and so forth. And so it's worth considering actually using it to affirm, young adults, Gen Z. And one of the other ways that you can do that is through different groups that you have online, text engagement, and then also by creating digital resources. So just like, there's the Bible app, what would it look like if your church curated a devotional that was featured on the Bible app, right? Because a lot of them use the Bible app. Maybe it's developing an ebook, or maybe many of you, you may have a church app already, but getting a church app designed and built definitely demonstrates that you are attempting to swing along the curve as it pertains to the use of technology. So next, number 4, to reach and develop Gen Z, is to provide authentic teaching and discipleship. So what does that look like? That looks like meaningful relationships. Okay. You saw me share earlier from our focus groups, like wanting that conversational culture. And so no longer is the day where folks just want somebody preaching at them. Again, generational allegiance is not the thing that it once was. People don't know their pastors like that. So maybe back in the day, your pastor was your cousin or somebody from the neighborhood, and they had the authority, and they had the relational capital to be able to say certain things. But now, in order for you to say certain things, in order for you to correct, in order for you to guide, you have to develop meaningful relationships and be willing to mentor, as opposed to preaching. And by preaching, I'm not saying don't preach the gospel, but what I'm saying is preaching at people, and using gimmicks. In our research, we found that they're not looking for the smoke in the machines, and they would probably be much more satisfied with just some small group or circle. Okay. Discipleship is really important. And so discipling people to actually study the word, discern the word, apply scriptures to their life, modeling what it is to share faith authentically, is really key, right? So how do we live out our faith? How do we move from don't do this, don't do that, and actually equip Gen Z to understand what freedom in Christ is? I can speak for myself. I knew I was called at 16 years old. But however, I didn't have the language then. But in hindsight, all I saw was religion. And I remember telling God, I don't know what you want from me, but I'm not doing that. And that was religion, just religious activity. And so then how do I really authentically live this thing out in Christ? And then, finally, getting back to that relational piece, relationships that nurture spiritual growth. Again, the relationship piece is going to be key if you are going to get through to them and be able to do, Jerry, you have me laughing. Yep, not doing that. And so that relational piece is going to be important for you to be able to speak into their lives. All right. And so then number 5, we're almost done, is to listen, to understand, and improve. That's our 5th way for reaching and developing Gen Z. So more of the same. Be a listening ear. Be willing to learn. Seek to understand. Okay. How do you understand and adapt? How does Gen Z experience their faith? Have you ever asked someone, how do they, how do they want to experience their faith? I think what allowed our focus groups to be so successful is because it really just was a space that they could just come talk and be heard and not judge. And honestly, you all, I would say, just in my time at the African American Church Evangelism Institute, those focus groups were was just one of the most sacred spaces, that I've had the privilege to be in, because it takes something to, really share where you are, not be judged. And if we're honest, well, let me speak for myself. In this journey, I started walking wholeheartedly with God at 25-ish. I'll be 42 this year. There's plenty of times where I'm just like, yeah, let's just throw this all away. Like, why am I doing this? Right? And nobody gives permission to say those things. Nobody gives permission to share their disengagement narratives, what I call disengagement narratives. So instead of assuming why they left or that they don't want to be there, how about invite a conversation to inquire about why they left and how you can invite them into the fold? What would allow them to feel welcome? What seems hospitable from their point of view? And then finally, I would say to create allyship. Allyship is very different from mentoring, and so allyship is just you leaving the door open. I'm here for you. I'm not trying to be the expert. I'm not the one trying to have all the answers. I'm just trying to be here and available to you in the way that you give me permission to be, and then we allow God to do it, Holy Spirit to do that work. Number 6, for reaching and developing Gen Z is to host relevant community events. So, as I mentioned earlier, the church has had this inward focus. Okay. So there's been mission drift, and it is okay to prioritize fun and enjoyment. It is okay to just really get creative beyond Sunday morning. You know, the likelihood is that for the direction that this culture, where we are in culture and time, is that folks may not step foot in your church, but they may regularly come to a monthly, I don't know, it's summertime, I don't know, maybe you do a monthly food truck situation, at your church. They may, appreciate something like that. And then you're creating environments for interest. You're creating environments for fellowship. You're not just preaching it, you're actually living it out. You're not just saying from the pulpit, love your neighbor. You're actually living that out, whether it's a food event, whether it's a clothing drive, whether it is perhaps to partner with organizations in the community that maybe already have the ear or the interest of this group. And then you learn to serve their interests. Paul talks about being all things to all people. And so who do you need to be in order to serve their interests and passions beyond just Sunday morning? I think that's a valuable question for the pastors. And I didn't share this earlier, but the Institute, the African American Church Evangelism Institute, we actually have a 2-year cohort program that helps senior pastors cultivate a vision and systems and tools that equips their key leaders and their congregants to have a more effective gospel witness. And one of the ways that we do that is by having you shift your focus to outreach, but outreach that includes evangelism, because a lot of folks are doing outreach, but they're not doing outreach with evangelism. And so anyway, the goal is to create a sense of belonging and authenticity. And through our program, the results have been that ministries create a more evangelistic culture, and by creating a more evangelistic culture, meaning that just by you being in relationship with Amaya or with David or Juwan, right, that you have tools and you have strategies for how to actually reach people for where they are at. So, that's that. This is one of my favorites for reaching and developing Gen Z, is to gather data. What do I mean by that? So, you can gather data, obviously, in the traditional way, depending upon the size of your church or the size of your group. You may want to conduct a survey. Maybe after every event that you do, you conduct a survey. Maybe Sunday mornings after service, you conduct a survey so that you can see where people are and how they felt when they entered the parking lot, how they experienced when they walked in the door, how they experienced worship, so on and so forth. Those are opportunities where you can conduct a survey. You build relationships. And again, that's a repeat. I think it's about the third or fourth time I talked about this relational piece. And so building relationships means, who will you be? Will you be the person that's willing to go where they are, to hang out where they are? Will you be the one that's willing to not be the authority, just be a friend? And so just befriend someone, and then maybe they introduce you to their friends. And then, I mentioned allyship a little bit earlier. And allyship, you foster mutual learning and mutual encouragement, because we have to know that they have something to contribute as well. Okay. We are not just the ones with something to contribute. I think that's Bible all day long. Obviously, we see plenty of biblical examples of transitions, or some transitions, but relationships between the different generations, whether that's Moses and Joshua, whether that's Paul and Timothy. Paul spurs Timothy on, like, man, I know you got your mama and your grandma faith. Stir up those gifts. I know that it's in you. And so anyway, just calling out the good in them is a good way to, get them to open up. I know I mentioned my sister earlier. I can text my sister. I can call my sister. I can FaceTime my sister. I'm going to get a little bit of nothing from her when I speak with her. But let me take her out to eat. And I'm about to drop her back off at the dorm, and we just sit in the car. She's going to tell me all the things. Okay. And so I've even had to learn that, to not be offended when she won't tell me much over the phone and things like that. But that face-to-face time, that interest, coming to where she is, all of that makes the difference, especially even when I ask her for advice. So those are ways that you gather data. And then finally, our eighth way to reach and develop Gen Z is to, what I like to say, realign with the original mission of the Black church. So what does that mean? So the original mission of the Black church was self-help, particularly self-help economics, hyper-focus on achieving liberation as it pertains to education, politics, and then obviously with the Black church being the hub for the civil rights movement, they are looking for today's church to address contemporary injustices. That was one of the main themes within our research. So whether it was my group, right? So I worked with the churched and unchurched young adults within the African American community, but on the research team was also a research assistant for the work that we did with white, Latino, and Asian churches, and across the board, across racial and ethnic lines, they believe that the church is too quiet. I remember one young lady sharing that she's like, I mean, I appreciate Black Lives Matter, but I would like to actually know who my leaders are, that like, who are they in my community? And she was specifically pointing to looking for something that resembled, and again, we're not in the times of MLK, and we need several MLKs at this point. But she's looking for someone who is a pillar in the community, where as opposed to folks who are just jumping up and creating movements and so on and so forth, and you may not be sure of what their motives are. And so then what that means is that if you are disconnected from your community, if on Sunday morning you come into the pulpit and you're not addressing what just happened outside, you need to be considering how leadership will advocate for social economic advancement today, and take action. What does that look like today? There's no need to try to mimic. The needs were so different back then, and this is part of my dissertation research, because as I shared earlier, I'm focused on the role of the Black church in entrepreneurship. But one of the reasons I'm interested in that is because I actually believe entrepreneurship is a pathway to help bridge income gaps. And so then what does that look like today for the church to serve the African American community in that way? Yes, prophetic voice. Yeah, and actually, when you mention that, there are categories. So whether they call it prophetic and they call it priestly and prophetic. So priestly being more involved with the things like internally of the church, and prophetic, if your church has a prophetic being, you are more likely to be involved in the things outside of the church around politics, education, etc. So that's right on, Jerry. Thank you for that. And so that was our last and final strategy for reaching and developing Gen Z. So let's talk. I am happy to hear your thoughts, take your questions, share more about research with the Institute, share more about our program, and then I will come off. I'll take my screen down, but before I do that, I just wanted to go ahead and also, oh, maybe that's the end of my presentation. I thought I had one more. Okay, I'll put it in the chat. I was going to share my contact information with you all. But so I see we've had more people join since I shared the screen. I couldn't see much, but welcome. Thank you for being here. I would love to hear from y'all, thoughts, questions about tonight's presentation.
Well, certainly, Brandi, I want to thank you. I think you were spot on so many things that we've been thinking about from our church side. Reverend Travis is on. He serves as my youth minister. I served as the youth minister for some 16 years. He was one of my young people now. He provides leadership for the youth. So you really confirmed a lot of things for us, and again, stamping some things that we should do going forward. If you would say, for a very traditional church, our church is some 223 years of age. When you talk about changing a culture and having that young people in a shared leadership position, do you have any kind of practical things that you've seen really work well as regards to that?
Yeah, so one of a church I used to be a part of. I lived in Nashville for a little bit. I'm now in Chicago area, but my church in Nashville, my pastor was notorious for creating task force teams. So, maybe he assigned a particular project to that group to be able to carry it out be able to instruct and provide guidance, but overall give them the autonomy to develop, what it is. I think you can do that through having some type of apprenticeship for different particular areas. You could do it through, I don't know if you have a ministry training program. So ministry training program is one way to go about it. And also, I would just say that if you assess the gaps in your ministry, i.e. perhaps technology, then why not create a team of those that you have in your church to be able to lead it, or to create a proposal, ask them to create a proposal of what they see and what they need, what they believe the gaps are and how they believe they can bridge the gaps. I think that's a great way. I was just at a conference over the weekend, and actually the conference is coming up. I'm doing a GenZ session at this particular at this particular conference in Chicago. It's called, I don't want to mess their name up. I'm going to look for it, but I believe it's called Tech and Talents. And so one of the things in the workshop that they shared was that folks in tech are happy to serve their churches, and that it would really take them or you bringing them to the table, sharing what your gaps are, whether it's information that you need to find out about your church. So that survey data that I talked about, having someone be able to determine what the data says about your congregants and what their needs are, or even, like I said, obviously social media and YouTube and all those things are great too. Yeah, it's called Talents and Tech Conference. But anyway, and it's specifically for using tech talents for God's glory. So anyway, something like that, may be a thing that you could do as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Hi, I'm Dr. Rona Williams. I'm Director of Faith Learn Thrive. I'm sitting in the back pew tonight, and as I listened to that question, I couldn't help but reflect on my own leadership journey. I'm in the car, so I apologize for the background noise. But something that's really practical that you guys can do is to start allowing the youth and young adults to lead within their own ministry area. As a young person, I remember when churches consistently had youth leadership teams. We were the youth president, the vice president, the little treasurer. We didn't have much money, but somebody was going to count it and write down in the little notebook how much money we raised at youth group that night or at Bible study that night. But I believe it gave me a lot of foundational leadership training and the confidence to be a leader. And we did things like plan our youth Sunday. I'd have to plan the youth Sunday with my team and figure out who's going to be the speaker that day. Or, we're going to have the youth choir. We're going to get somebody to do a solo. Like, just beginning to take leadership on some level is very, very helpful. And then also encouraging them to volunteer and be a part of the larger church community. And approaching them with opportunities, because sometimes they think you're not going to let them, so they're not even thinking about doing something or being a part of a ministry area or leading a project team, because our tradition has been to relegate them to the background. So approach them with the opportunity. Identify some places where we need a young voice and go to them and ask them to step up to leadership in this area. And I think the more you begin to be intentional about that, you start to then change the culture of your church.
Thank you. I love that last piece you said about being intentional. We did something of the nature of gathering youth and young adults, and one of the questions that we raised was, what was the most impactful day that you ever had in this church? And it's a lot of different answers, but all of the answers really came back to this core thought when we made intentional efforts as a church to help them to grow in their faith. So thank you again.
Brandi, I was going to say, Dr. Williams came off mute at the same time. And thanks, Pastor Holmes, for that question. I wanted to reference the fact that Faith, Learn, Thrive with you, Brandi. Last month, I mentioned it, did that, and I put it in the chat for you, a podcast, and it's actually on our website, I believe, and Brandi shared along with the team, and we had a group of young people that represented Gen Z. It was a very, very enlightening podcast. You remember it, Brandi. And so it should be taped and recorded there at faithlearnthrive.org. And you can go back and listen. It has a lot of some kids talking, youth people, as well as Brandi sharing a lot of practical things that might also bless you as well.
Yeah. And I think that also goes back to the piece about the gathering data. So, asking them what they enjoy, what are they involved in at school, likelihood they're probably involved in some type of leadership at their school, even though they may not be within the church. So, yeah.
I don't know that I have a question as much as a thought or a comment, something you said, and I couldn't type it fast enough, but, you said a lot of stuff that I found myself in, right? Especially when you asked us to put our youth in the chat. Things like, I think what I'm hearing you say more than everything connects, of course, with relationship. But I think that a lot of times we challenge our relationships because we're not the greatest listeners. I heard you mention the importance of listening and really trusting the Holy Spirit. And I think sometimes from our generation, that we often try to be the Holy Spirit, unbeknownst to us. Mm-hmm. And so thank you for sharing that. We try to make them know and make them do it instead of trusting the God that we say that we trust them with. Because we're so bent on instruction and making sure they get it and they're not just getting it. And so I'm so guilty. And I thank you for that. Thank you. Listen more.
I appreciate you sharing that. I have an example of my grandmother. So my grandma, she'll be 89 this year, and I'm the oldest grandchild, and the one right after me is 27, I believe. But when he was probably in his late teens, like just coming out of high school, he would have conversation. He just loved to ruffle my grandmother's feathers, because if you're not talking about Jesus, grandma is not even trying to hear it. So, Evan, yes, rules without relationship equals rebellion. Absolutely. I just read that.
Thank you for the correction. I left out the word out right without.
Yeah. I was just reading that somewhere. But so Evan says, I don't really know about the whole Jesus thing or whatever. And grandma immediately gets alarmed. And so then Evan tells me about the conversation, and he says, yeah, you don't have to talk to me about the whole Jesus thing, because I'm not really sure about Jesus. I was like, oh, okay. I was like, so, I mean, on a percentage wise, like, how sure are you about Jesus? And he's probably said something like 72%. I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. Like reaction completely different than my grandmother, because what I know from my own experience is that God can do everything with your 72%. Like, he doesn't need you to be at 100. I could think of a hard season in my own life where I was really struggling with something, and my mentor said to me, and this is in recent years, like on a scale of 1 to 10, like, how committed are you to not struggling? And I said, a 7. And she says, like, you're not afraid that just being at a 7, like, that's just going to leave you in a bad place? I said, no, because I know that God will meet me with my 7. Okay. So I think we don't hear that. Who do you hear say that? Right? Like, but I'm not afraid to say it. And this is me as a leader, is someone who leads, pastors at churches, right? Like in an evangelism program. And I have the nerve to get up and say this. I've had a day where it was 7 out of 10 for me. Yes, absolutely I did. And God met me in it. And so, even more of that is what they're looking for.
Are you able to put in the chat, please, your article
Oh, yeah.
that you wrote? I think it might be a blessing to our viewers.
I sure can. 1 second.
I'm sure while Brandi's gathering that, are there any other questions for her?
Hey, Brandi, can you hear me?
Hey, Travis. Yep.
Once again, I'm from First Baptist with Pastor Jerry Holmes. And with me and you being the millennials, you may understand I'm 35, so I'm right there, kind of guess in the middle, I guess you can say. Being the bridge, I believe, is for our group, and because I think for young people, we have to help them also understand the season of where they are, why they don't want to let go so easily. I think for us, it's very important as the millennials, as that bridge, as the leaders, to help them understand that the season want to be just like them, want to be respected, want to be remembered. Sorry, my son is crying. And wants to be relevant. And they want to remain that because they've been in that spot. And so I think it's easier for us, it softens the blow when we are able to be that bridge to help blend them into different ministries. What I've done with Pastor Holmes is we've tried to not keep youth ministry in the corner and keep youth ministry as the daycare or the babysitting club. But we've put them into different ministries like the media ministry. We put them in and integrated them into different, the adult ministries, if you will, to where it's just a ministry, even kind of getting out of the language of saying youth revival, and it's revival that's, ran by the youth, to help them feel more involved. I think that was a great point that was brought up about making them feel like you're a part of this church. You're not just sitting here just to be quiet. And to be seen. So once again, great. Thank you for that presentation. But just thank you.
Thank you. And I agree with you. I say it all the time that I do believe that it's us and the younger Gen Xers. I do believe that we are the bridge. And I believe that last year, so in our program, we have the 2-year program that I mentioned for senior pastors. One of the core things that we're working on right now is how to integrate more things around connecting with Gen Z. So last year I wrote some curriculum on growing churches younger that utilized our data. And so one of the core pieces of the curriculum is about intergenerational leadership, the importance of it, what it is versus what it isn't, because a lot of times the older generation can perceive it to be a threat. I think it's just really is what you just said. Like, I want to be relevant. I want to be important. I want to be seen. I want to be heard. I want to be known. And so right out the bat, it's like, no. Bringing them to the table doesn't, make you less significant, because we're all significant in the kingdom of God. It's just, what is our place? What is our place? What is our assignment in this season? All right. Like, and so then when is it time to transition? I talk to many pastors who don't have succession plans, have given no thought to who the next leader will be, just because we still have a segment of folks who come from that school of dying in the pulpit and and so on and so forth. And so, intergenerational leadership ensures a thriving legacy, because I think legacy is often on the heart of pastors as well. So you may have been in the prime of your ministries in the 90s and the 2000s, but what are people saying about you in the ministry today? And how can you ensure, that you leave a great legacy? So I know we're right at 7. If I may, I would love to put in the chat a conversation that I'll be hosting on Monday, if you're interested, entitled The State of Evangelism. That's what we'll be sharing about on Monday, myself along with the chair and co-chairs of my executive council. But that gospel impact link that I put above, you probably have to copy and paste it, is how you register for that event. But there's the flyer there. If you're interested, I would love to see you there. And I appreciate you having me. Myra, Rona, thank you.
We're so glad you were able to come, and all of you that joined us tonight. Thank you. Thank you for being a part of Faith, Learn, Thrive. Keep listening out for the more and more wonderful things that we have coming. We have our Building Stronger Churches conference that I'd like to let you know that's coming up on August 24th. At 9:30 a.m. it begins. We're right in the middle of our registration now. It's going to be a great one-day event. You can go to Faith, Learn, Thrive and register, find out more about it. It's the Building Stronger Churches conferences. And we're excited. There's going to be ministry labs, church talk speakers, live worship, leadership luncheon is involved. There's sponsorship and exhibitor opportunities as well. And so we would love to have you support. And thank you, Brandi. It's 7:00 where you are.
Oh, yes. It's 8:00 where y'all are.
And it's 8:01 where you are. We want to be mindful of your time. And so thank you for joining us tonight. Brandi, thanks for being a friend and a wonderful person. And it's a part of our family, Faith, Learn, Thrive, and all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. And listen out for more things coming. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you all.
We'll see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.